Well, today we turn our attention to EFL League One and the playoff semi-finals. Two ties between four teams looking to make it to Wembley. Third v sixth, fourth v fifth. But who will make the final on Saturday the 18th of May? We're going to look ahead to preview and predict both of the semi-finals and both legs of them as well. And as always, and as I encourage you to do in the championship predictions, get involved in the comments, give us your score predictions for both legs and let us know who you think the two finalists will be. And if you beat or match my overall score, I'll give you a shout out in the next recap when we look ahead to the final in a couple of weeks' time. A very quick plug before we get started as well, because it's been a busy week on the podcast too. We had our championship final day predictions video yesterday. You can find that up in the eye above. Come and get involved with the predictions there. Tomorrow, we're looking ahead to the National League playoff final to see who's coming up to the EFL. And then we're also going to have a look at League Two on Saturday afternoon. Those ties taking place on Bank Holiday Monday. But for now, we're looking ahead to two big games across Friday and Saturday, with the return legs next Tuesday and Wednesday. And of course, the four teams looking to join the championship and join Portsmouth and Derby up there are Bolton Wanderers, Peterborough United, Oxford United and Barnsley. Now, bar Sheffield Wednesday, who came up last year, we've actually got all of the same sides, which shows the consistency at the top of the division. Derby and Portsmouth making a jump above them all from outside the playoffs last year to the top two. And joining them this year in Sheffield Wednesday's place is Oxford United. Will they just go through and win it as well? Let's get through to our predictions, and we will start with the first tie, which takes place on Friday night and then the return leg on Tuesday night. It is Barnsley versus Bolton Wanderers. A repeat of last year's semi-final, but I think fair to say teams in slightly different positions now. The first leg will see Barnsley host Bolton on Friday night, and of course Barnsley snuck in on the final day in very bizarre circumstances. Didn't win any of their final 6 games of the season after looking like they were going to comfortably make the playoffs. Sacked their manager on the eve of the final day of the season because of their poor form and because they were starting to dwindle. And only essentially got in because Lincoln had a poor game against Pompey on the final day after being in mesmerising form for 2 or 3 months. So you would argue that Barnsley are very much the underdogs with no pressure on them going into this. Under the interim management of Martin Devaney, they picked up a draw on the final day, which was enough at home to Northampton, and it was almost a win in fairness. They got past the 90-minute mark. But last year, we saw them be very aggressive against Bolton and earn their place in the final. This year, you do feel on paper it's maybe going to look slightly different because Bolton finished in 3rd place and were in the race for automatic promotion right to the end. Unfortunately, though, just a few too many draws for them towards the end of the season. 3 of their last 4 games, and uncharacteristically just starting to let in a lot of goals again, which really did cost them in the end. That home draw against Shrewsbury was a real killer blow. Despite that, Bolton have got the best defensive record of the 4 teams in the playoffs, albeit nowhere near the top 2 in the division, and Barnsley have got the worst. There's 13 goals difference between them. But the thing that I want to highlight really for both of these playoffs is the goals scored column, because for Bolton and Peterborough, very much goals scored is the aim of the game. They're the 2 highest scoring teams in the division this year. Bolton with 86, Peterborough top with 89. And Bolton have the best home record in the league. Now, last season, actually, for Bolton, it was a lack of goals that was sometimes the problem. They weren't as clinical in front of goal as other teams. This time around, though, against the Barnsley defence that is a little bit brittle, you would expect them to perhaps change that. I know in the away leg, they're going to have to try and survive because over the course of the season, actually, Barnsley have got a better away record than Bolton have. But Barnsley have also got a better away record than their home record, which is pretty dismal. Only picking up 34 points at home all season, which actually put them 12th in the overall table. Bolton, 5th in the away table. Don't concede a huge amount. Best defensive record after Lincoln and the top 2. But again, not quite as fluent scorers on the road, albeit the Peterborough game on the final day, they popped up with 3. So for me, based on that, looking at the fact that Barnsley have drawn their last couple of home games and away from home, Bolton have been solid rather than spectacular, I think I would edge possibly towards a draw in the first game. I could see Barnsley being a little bit tighter, just trying to stay in the tie, particularly given their poor form, and maybe not being quite as expansive. Almost a role reversal of what we saw in the game between the two last year in the playoffs. But the second leg, for me, is where this gets decided. I know Barnsley have still got that counter-attacking threat. They've got John McAtee on loan from Luton, who obviously we know well. You've got Devante Cole, both fluent goal scorers at their best. Bolton, of course, heavily reliant on Dion Charles, as they were last year. Lovely to see Cameron Jerome's experience getting a goal on the final day. Player again we know from Luton. But they have been giving up leads recently, which is something they've got to be concerned about. Home record, though, is where I think this gets decided. We know Barnsley had a poor home record, but Bolton, best in the league. 50 points, only Portsmouth managed the same this season. But Bolton, 52 goals scored in 23 home games. For me, I think once they get it back, if they can get it back without defeat in the first leg, they'll be comfortable favourites going into it. They've not lost in a while, and it's two teams coming in very different form. And just that experience of last year and being that little bit more compact, I think will help them through this situation. Barnsley, for me, are not as strong a side as they were last season. Obviously, we took their skipper at Luton as well. And despite the fact they've got a very good away record and actually are the highest scorers away from home in League One this year, I just don't think it's going to be enough against Bolton. So for the first leg, I think we could easily see a draw. I'd probably sit on the fence and say maybe a 1-1. Get the Championship's favourite scoreline in for League One this time. But the second leg, I just think Bolton have too much at home. Barnsley have been really brittle defensively in recent times. And obviously, away from home, they're not conceding less than 2 a game. They do nearly always score. And Bolton, in recent weeks, have not been as good at the back. So the second leg, I'll go for a Bolton comfortable win by 3-1. That means I'm going for Bolton to progress 4-2 on aggregate with a 1-1 draw on Friday night and then a 3-1 victory at home on Tuesday evening. With that out the way, let's move on to the second tie and see who I think will be joining them, because on Saturday evening it is Oxford United versus Peterborough United, with a return leg taking place on Wednesday evening. Now Peterborough again, top scorers in the division. They know where the goal is. They've got so much attacking talent. Oxford United have got a couple of pretty potent goal scorers themselves and have really responded fairly well to Liam Manning going earlier in the year. It did look like they were going to drop off for a while, but they found a way to respond. And although they finished in the last 3 games pretty unconvincingly, that little run before where they beat Peterborough by 5-0, don't forget, and beat Burton and Fleetwood 4-0, really got them back in the mix and secured them a playoff chance. They have had a couple of star performers this year, and that game recently against Peterborough does give me some concern. It is worth noting that Peterborough won the reverse fixture 3-0, unlike the Barnsley-Bolton game that were both draws between the two. So this one we've seen very dominant performances from both, which I think going into the playoffs we can't read a huge amount into. Now I have to give some plaudits to Peterborough because they've changed their philosophy this summer, and after what was, I think, probably the greatest playoff shock of all time, or certainly the greatest playoff comeback of all time that Peterborough won the end of against Sheffield Wednesday last year, they've really responded well and produced a very good season. Of course, going to Wembley and winning a trophy already will help them if they get to the final. But for this one, it is almost a battle of attack v defence, isn't it? We know Peterborough are going to be aggressive. We know they're going to create chances and score goals. There are so many players capable of it in their side. We know they've got the star quality of Ephron Mason-Clark, who will be leaving at the end of this season after his loan. We've seen over the course of the season the likes of Johnson, Clark Harris, Ricky J. Jones, Joel Randall, etc. There's so many good players there. And there's always a threat, no matter who's fit and who's available. So for Peterborough, goals not the concern. And they've actually got a pretty consistent record, both home and away over the season. Their defensive record isn't that bad on the road if you take out that Oxford game. And at home, they score goals for fun. 55 over 23 games. A really incredible effort. So for Oxford, who at home themselves score plenty of goals, 44 from their 23, it does become a case of who can get the biggest win at home, in my opinion. I don't see anything other than the home side winning both legs. It's a much tighter tie overall, but I do still feel, looking at the division, that third and fourth have perhaps overall got the better quality. We often see those surprises in the playoffs where someone comes from nowhere. And if Lincoln had stuck in after being in great form, maybe Blackpool as well, then perhaps we could have suggested that. But I do think Peterborough and Bolton are inevitably just a little bit too strong. In the first leg, I am going to go for Oxford to get a narrow victory. Peterborough have failed to score in 2 of their last 3 away games and have conceded a fair few goals in recent weeks since that cup final. Whereas for Oxford, we know it's been a little bit tense in the last few weeks, so I think it might be a bit of an underwhelming first leg. A lot of people will be expecting big goals in this. The first leg I actually think could be a narrow, low-scoring victory for Oxford. We know both sides are good at home, but then Peterborough have picked up 40 points on the road. There's no doubting they've got quality. And both sides have fairly narrow goal differences away from home, which in Peterborough's case is not just narrow results. They win by 3 or they lose by 3. But I don't think that's going to happen this time. I think it will be a bit more cagey. Inevitably, Peterborough know they can do the job at home. They beat Sheffield Wednesday 4-0 at home last season. It was away from home that was the problem. So they'll be desperate to stay in this tie first leg, keep it tight. I'm going to go for 1-0 Oxford in the first leg, which will surprise a lot of people. In the return one at Peterborough, I just don't see anything other than a home win. They've got so much quality in front of goal. I know Oxford don't concede a huge amount in recent weeks, but over the season they have let in over 30 on the road. They did lose 3-0 at Peterborough, and I think it might be pretty similar again. So I'm going to go for Peterborough to win the home leg pretty convincingly. I'm actually going to go by 3-0, and that overall will send Peterborough through 3-1 on aggregate, with a 1-0 defeat away on Saturday night and a 3-0 victory in a return fixture on Wednesday night at their own stadium. So that means if we have a quick look at what I've gone for, I am predicting a Peterborough v Bolton final, 3rd v 4th, which is pretty bold based on what we've seen some years in these divisions. However, it is what we got last season, and it was these two sides who finished 5th and 6th that were on the wrong end of it. I'm going for them to learn from their experience, and this time, Bolton to right the wrong against Barnsley from last year, and Peterborough not to be on the end of the greatest comeback of all time, and to end up at Wembley for the 2nd time this year. Bolton by 4-2 on aggregate, and Peterborough by 3-1 on aggregate. So those are just my predictions for the 23-24 EFL League One playoff semi-finals. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know who you think's going to win and make it to Wembley, and let me know what you think the score will be in both legs of both ties. If you beat or match my overall score, you will get a shout out in the recap when we look ahead to the final. That will be live in a couple of weeks' time. Which two sides are going to be there? Good luck to all 4. I have no vested interest. I'm a complete neutral. Though if Luton do get relegated next year, Bolton's the only ground of the 4 I haven't done. So from that point of view of doing the 92, I probably need Bolton to come up. But in truth, I don't really mind. I hope they all go well. And most importantly, as a neutral, I hope they're good games to watch. If you did enjoy this video, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. If you want to stay up to date with all of the predictions at this chaotic end to the season, and subscribe and turn that notification bell on. As I mentioned earlier, come and get involved in the predictions for the Championship. Our final day look ahead was available yesterday. That's up in the eye above. And in the next 2 days, we'll be looking ahead to the National League playoff final at Wembley this Sunday and the League 2 playoff semi-finals. That episode will be out on Saturday. Thank you very much for watching though and being involved as always. And we'll see you back here tomorrow to predict who's going to win promotion to the EFL on Sunday.